Live. Are we doing it live? Oh, yeah. Sunday sermons means it's 10 a.m. in Utah. That means, guess what, you godless bitches? It's time for church. Where you at? Get your ass out of bed. Roll into church. It's time for church. With coffee, though. Which makes us officially the best church in the state of Utah. Yeah. Pretty much the best church anywhere, though, if you ask me. Especially because today we're going to get to hear a sermon. We're going to get to hear a Sunday sermon for godless people by our very own director, Jennie Gage, one of the members of the board of directors. Those of you who say, I don't know what that means, you don't need to worry about that. You worry about that when you've been a member of the church for at least a year, and then you can become a voting member of the Church of Korihor. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. And spiritual leaders, the spiritual leadership, including the heraldry, the luminaries, and the directors. So the directors are elected. These directors were elected by the entire body of the church, which was me at the time. But in a year, we will hold more ballots, and we will be, we'll start asking people, what do you think? Who should we put in these positions? And it's important who the directors are, because the directors, like Jennie, they're the ones who decide what the succession looks like. Namely, in that question, should we remunerate the heraldry? The heralds are going to be a community of clergy who are basically somewhat like apostles. I hate to appropriate that term. That's a very Christian thing, but basically that's what we are. And so instead of doing it in some silly fashion, like whoever has been an apostle the longest is the leader, what'll happen is that occasionally we'll probably remunerate, and remuneration means that, we put it to the membership who of the heralds should be the leader at that point in time. Because as we've said before, and I have stated many times, for a while, this is going to be a bit cult of Joe, because, well, there's not anybody else to make all these decisions. And we need to be able to make decisions and move quickly. But the ambition is going to be that in the future, we are going to put people into the hot seat, the position of power, which now is not that powerful. But in the future will change. We're going to shuffle that out. And my ambition, my hope is that the Church of Korihor will be led very soon, sooner than later, anyways, by somebody very different from me. Maybe that's a woman. Maybe that's a trans person. Maybe that's a gay person. Maybe that's someone from a not a Mormon background at all. Somebody who has a very different background from me. Okay. And so it's like the decision, the people who will make the decision that time has come will be the directors. In addition, the directors are going to be in charge of communication and transparency for the church. They're going to make sure that all of the financial statements are made available to the people, to the public, to make sure that everybody understands where money is going inside the church. There's really no obligation under the law for us to do any of that, frankly. It's a little bit terrifying what churches are not required to disclose. Well, in the Church of Korihor, we're going to disclose. We're here to disclose. So we're going to get going with Jennie here in a minute. I do want to mention real quickly that we're launching this week at the Church of Korihor a new page on the website. It's not there live now, so don't look at it if you're here in the present. But if you're there in the future, hi. What's it like in the future? Don't tell me. Don't tell me. What will happen is that you'll be able to click on the link. You'll learn about what it means to be a luminary, who are basically our missionary force. And only luminaries, instead of being those annoying missionaries who come to your door, knock on your door and ask you, would you like to hear about our Lord? Nobody. Instead, we're going to be going out there and putting blankets on people who are cold out there in the winter months here in Utah and all over the country, all over the United States. So I definitely need people who want to become luminaries. Also, I've already had at least a couple of people who have asked, how long it'll be before they can be ordained to some part of the ministry of the Church of Korihor so that they can become officiants for weddings. That'll be the same order, luminaries. And to be a luminary, you don't have to be a member of the Church of Korihor, though you're certainly welcome to join. We are, as soon as we can get bank accounts and things like that set up, we're also going to be accepting for the first time actual bona fide members of the Church of Korihor to take the oath of reason. Those of you who really connect to the mission of the church, you'll be able to become members of the church. So we're going to get going. We have Jennie Gage, who is director of the Church of Korihor and also has her own YouTube channel, Life Take Two. Of course, she's also on Substack, where she's been for a long time, and she is very well established there. Does all of these great short videos. Please make sure that you subscribe to Jennie's YouTube, and also that we support her. I'm going to bring her on in a minute, and then following the sermon prepared by Jennie, we are going to witness the first conversion to the Church of Korihor, which is where I will take the oath of reason. Woohoo! So I'm excited. Hope you guys are excited. And I'm hoping by next Sunday we'll also be bringing on some singing in the Church of Korihor. That'll be fun. Hey, Jennie, how are you?
Good morning, Joe. I'm nervous. I feel like Mormon church speaking and sacrament meeting nervous.
Oh man,
and,
this is so much higher
I broadcast
stakes.
to people all the time, and I'm never nervous doing anything, but there is something about this. Anyway, good morning. Thank you so much for letting me be part of this whole entire thing. I love it. Love everything that you're doing.
Absolutely.
Love the new things that you're adding.
You know, I'm excited about what you're doing, Jennie. You really have been contributing a lot since we started into this. I mean, we got an episode of Church for Atheists that I'm going to be putting out this week finally. And it's going to be, I mean, I was so pleasantly surprised that when I started talking about what divorce could look like if it were celebrated by a church, and I thought, I don't know who I can turn to for this. I had a few friends that I could turn to and say, tell me what you think. And then you kind of showed up in that experience.
And I was divorce fairy.
That's I mean, you're definitely the wisest person I know for what that should look like. And I thought, man, we're just so fortunate we have Jennie to guide us through that. And then when you told me, you're like, is there a possibility I could preach a sermon one day? I said, are you kidding me? Let's do it now. Let's do it right away. I said, I got to hear this. So as I've said before, I think Jennie's sermons will probably become my favorites. So I'm going to duck out and pass the mic. And Jennie, you have the floor. Everybody, Jennie Gage.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. This really is, it's funny how that I interact on YouTube and lives and podcasts and TV shows and stuff all the time. And I really do have like this preaching a sermon jitters this morning. I want to just share a little bit of behind the scenes before I get into what I want to talk about today. I was LDS for 44 years, and I was always in Relief Society presidencies, Young Women's President, Primary President, things like that. And my husband was in callings where we tended to speak in church a lot. And in all of those times that I have gotten to speak in church, I was always told by some man what I was supposed to talk about. I was given specific, obviously religious-based doctrines and policies that were supposed to be the themes for my talk. And I really had very little wiggle room for what I wanted to talk about. Nobody really ever asked me, was there something that I wanted to stand at that microphone for 15 minutes before my husband spoke and share? And as Joe and I have been kind of bouncing ideas off of each other here the past couple of weeks, after he said, yes, you can preach a sermon, but then it was a little bit quicker than I anticipated. So I didn't really have time to wrap my head around what that would look like. As we've been bouncing ideas, there has never been a single moment where Joe said, here's something that I want you to teach about. Here's some doctrine, policy, objective that I have. It has been a conversation between two people engaging in what do you think, not what are you supposed to believe that I want the rest of the congregation to believe that I need you to stand at a microphone and speak about. And it has actually been a really emotionally freeing and healing experience to be part of Joe forming this church and inviting me in as one of the founders, and to talk about how we're going to carve out a space for other like-minded people. And not that we're all exactly homogenized and identical, but people who don't believe in Jesus or Allah or Buddha and still want a space where we can talk about our thoughts and share kind of our little vision for the world. It's been extremely emotional and I would say therapeutic and cathartic. So I sort of feel like I need to send Joe a check for the therapy that has been performed in this action. Also, just as a little bit of foundational thought process as I dive into my Godless sermonless sermon here. For most of my life, all of my time standing at a pulpit in Mormon church has been very much focused on centering men. Most of the time I ever spoke in church, I was just the warm-up act for my husband. So I would introduce my children and my family and talk about all the ways that I had used my womb. Even as a young woman, I was talking about how I was going to go to the temple someday or things that I was learning. And all of my talks seemed to be centered around either my future eternal companion, my current eternal companion, and our children. And as I kind of prepared this sermon, I thought I want to go just the opposite of that and kind of expand all of our vision today away from just husband and wife and that little nuclear family. And I hope that as we kind of discuss these things today, and as I share some of my thoughts with you, that you may possibly, if you're a female coming out of religion, be able to decenter men just a little bit for just this little space of time, and that we can look at ourselves as individuals in the broader web of this amazing journey that we're on called life. So there's my background. Having been born and raised in the Mormon church, I believed in the eternal bond of celestial marriage. I believed deeply the teaching that neither the man without the woman nor the woman without the man. I believed deeply in the command to leave and cleave, that my bonds with parents, siblings, and friends should be limited after marriage, and that my focus should be on my husband, which prompted me as a young 20-year-old to basically ghost everyone in those couple years of newlywed life so that I could spend every waking moment with my new husband. I believed that twain could become one flesh. And honestly, my 50-year-old self gets a little bit embarrassed and I kind of get cold chills. And I'm a little hesitant to even say this next little sentence here when I think about my wedding night with that belief of twain becoming one flesh, when a few hours after my sealing ceremony to a recently returned missionary in the Portland, Oregon temple, this is not a joke either, I believed that the act of intimacy would literally make us one on some secret spiritual level. I believed that the American nuclear family, husband and wife and kids, was the key building block of society. And if you guys can just picture in your minds for a moment, if you've come out of religion and you haven't been blessed to be atheist your whole life, if you can kind of picture some of the artwork that you may have seen with Adam and Eve in the garden, holding hands, and they're all alone. It's just them, this beautiful nuclear family. I believed that Adam and Eve had been the very first earthly nuclear family, patterned after our Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother, who were also, the origin of the original of the nuclear family. These beliefs left no space in my imagination for divorce, for a wife like me with a second husband after the collapse of a marriage. They blinded me to any thought of lesbians raising children together, or family systems with parents out of the picture and grandparents raising kids. I had a manager at my high school job, the Safeway on 190th and Powell in Gresham, Oregon, by the way, for any of my Oregonians there, who had lived with a woman for 20 years and had a few kids together without being married. And I was perpetually horrified by this man. I would talk to my manager all the time about, why don't you guys get married? Heavenly Father wants you to get married. And I prayed for him constantly, knowing that they weren't a real family. Like any good Mormon girl, I was obsessed with the nuclear family model and obsessed with hating anyone who challenged it. And then one day, 6 years ago, I accidentally, without intending to do it, lost my faith in the Mormon church. 2 weeks later, I would lose that Mormon returned missionary husband after 24 years of marriage. And suddenly my whole life and my worldview were a blank slate waiting to be written on. What was the ideal human family? I began to wonder. If Joseph Smith wasn't real, if the Bible wasn't any more interesting, if the Bible wasn't any more than interesting mythology, and Adam and Eve and Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother and eternal marriage didn't exist, what did that leave? Thus began a 6-year deep dive into, I have actual printed up pages here. Sorry, this is like church style. Into the history of humanity. Scouring books, articles, college lectures, psychology journals, podcasts, documentaries, and YouTube for an understanding of who we are as Homo sapiens sapiens and what we need from one another. I have to say here too that I find human relationships so fascinating. It's that little tiny point of contact, two lives converging and sometimes combining. How and when and to what degree we relate to others is the stuff of love stories and murder mysteries. Empires rising and falling, heartbreaks and revolutions, and first kisses and births and scientific discovery, betrayal and loyalty. Humans bumping into other humans on the path of life is so very interesting. As I plowed through the history of human relationships, one pattern began to emerge really clearly. And you guys, I have to say that it was really hard for me to let go of that nuclear family, crosshairs target that I had always had deeply embedded in me, and to broaden my view and look back and see the real pattern of human relationships. Here's the pattern that emerged. The American Christian nuclear family model was a very new invention. Mom and dad living at home in the suburbs across the country from grandparents, isolated behind their picket fences, with dad going out and working in his office all day while mom stayed home alone and folded laundry, changed diapers, and made sourdough, was utterly novel and extraordinarily destructive to a couple 100,000 years of diverse and complex multi-generational tribalism. Humans, it turns out, need packs, not just a husband and wife and kids, and maybe a handful of friends of the same age and type to meet for yoga on Saturday mornings or have a barbecue in your backyard. But we have always had and need deeply a variety of ages and interests and abilities in our packs. One thing stands out in all research, and that is the need for tribal elders, and that is the focus of what I want to discuss today. The wise old ones, grandparents, older uncles, the people who have been through everything and are still around to tell the tales. They are so valuable in our tribes. We especially need older mentors to teach us things, as Gabor Mate lectures on often. According to Gabor, who I listen to so much, and I've read all of his books, he's so fascinating. We are evolutionary wired to attach to and follow the guidance of older caregivers, both learning from them and leaning on them. When the tribal elders are absent, younger generations are literally lost in every way possible to be lost, with nobody to learn from, no examples to follow, and no security. We're so insecure without those tribal elders, and our intimate relationships, that husband and wife bond, the little nuclear family, is under more and more pressure without the wisdom and help of our elders. In our American nuclear family model, we have big gaps currently in our tribes. And the biggest trend right now is absentee grandparents. The boomers are retiring to golf course communities in Phoenix and abandoning their roles within their tribes. Children live in neighborhoods with other children instead of living in farms and urban centers where there are natural, organic, multi-generational relationships. And it's possible to surround yourself almost exclusively with just your nuclear family and a couple of other nuclear families without that tribal diversity. And it's impacting our kids and grandkids and people my age. I'm 50, the millennials. It's impacting all of us that we've lost our tribal elders. So I have a Substack article that I would like to read on this topic called Deadbeat Grandparents. And I wrote this one day after moving into a new apartment and unpacking boxes that are full of things that I've inherited from my grandparents. And every single one of them has an actual memory around it where I can picture interacting with those grandparents, because I grew up in a time when we still had these tribal elders and we hadn't fixated so much just on our own little homes in the suburbs. Of course, I am the product of the boomers. So my parents were that first generation that was kind of isolating, but my grandparents were still very much present. So I'd like to segue into deadbeat grandparents. And I have this not behind a paywall on my Substack, Life Take Two, and this series is churchified. My great-grandmother shaped my life so much that her impact is still felt today. Hold on, let me make sure that I'm on page 1. Thank you for your patience. I'm so sorry. Kev printed this for me. 5 of 8, 7 of 8. Joe, thank you for being patient. I feel like I'm missing a couple of pages. Okay, we're going to switch away from paper. You guys, thank you for being patient. And when you're live, you can't just edit out. Hold on, Joe.
That's
I've
totally
got
cool,
it.
Jenny. You take the time that you need. You're doing great, Jenny.
Okay.
I just wanted to pop in to say that you're doing great. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I want to show the photo of my extended family. I'm down here in the front with a baby doll on my back. I think I'm in kindergarten. Here's my great-granddad and my great-grandma and my big, huge extended family. So deadbeat grandparents, the boomer gap has corroded our tribes. Lucy Lanier was an imaginative writer, a skilled photographer who developed her own photos in her home darkroom, a knitter, painter, a baker of bread and pies. Joe, I should have warned you that I did a YouTube video about this and cried my eyes out the whole time, so which is pretty appropriate for speaking in church, right? She had a wild and unpredictable sense of humor and long white hair almost to her knees, which she wore in a tight bun by day and would unwind from its bobby pins before bed and brush exactly 100 times with a silver-handled brush. She had lost most of her teeth early in her 20s and decided to have the rest pulled to stop the pain in her jaw, so wore dentures for much of her life. I would stand at the sink in her pink-tiled bathroom in Mesa, Arizona, my chin barely reaching the porcelain basin, and watch with freakish 5-year-old delight as she yanked her dentures out of her mouth and dropped them into a glass full of foaming denture cleaner. Lucy was my great-grandmother, and I am closely acquainted with the details of who she was as a woman and what her life had been, not because I've read about it or was told secondhand. No, I spent my childhood in Lucy's shadow, toddling and then walking beside her. I had watched from the foot of her bed the unwinding of the hair. She had this bun like right here, and she'd unwind it, had held the silver brush in my own hand, swiping it across my own platinum scalp when she had finished. I can still close my eyes and smell her cinnamon rolls. Could sketch out the floor plan of her 2 homes. To this day, I could literally sketch out her floor plans. Can describe intimately the copper streak that surrounded the pupils of her sea blue eyes. Lucy and the other older members of my family were my friends, my mentors, and my very frequent companions. I was raised by a tribe. Grandparents and great uncles, siblings, great grandmas, and second cousins 3 generations removed, versus the very isolating mom, dad, or mom, stepdad, or single mom with no dad, or whatever watery version of human family structure the majority of children have today, aka our nuclear families. My childhood was very intergenerational, and I assumed that my children would have the same, that was just how families worked. But the boomers have created a gap in the fabric of family, and it has proven difficult to repair. I do want to insert here that yes, there are boomer grandparents who are grandparenting, but statistics show that we no longer have any type of intergenerational tribe. And it's not just that the boomers are playing pickleball all day. There are so many factors behind it. Some of it is people being mobile. It's not all the boomers' fault. It's the system that we have. And it's important for us to look at those systems and not place blame on anybody, But I want you to think to yourself, what is my multi-generational tribe? And are there those some within it that can, possibly use some more connection? My great-grandmother shaped my life so much that her impact is still felt today. Lucy was obsessed with communism and the Soviet bloc, as were many Americans in her generation. She was born in 1903. I often think about the timeline of my great-grandmother's life. She saw Kaiser Wilhelm's assassination, World War I, the Bolshevik coup, Spanish flu, the Great Depression, which is when she was getting married and having babies, World War II, with Pearl Harbor being a day she never forgot and spoke about all the time. She would just bring it up at dinner, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, the Holocaust, Korea, the creation of the modern nuclear family, our migration from farms to suburbs, inventions like airplanes and TV and phone systems and credit cards and mortgages, the spread of communism, the rise of nations like China, the assassination of Johnny Kennedy, as she called him, the popularity of MLK and Rosa Parks, the massive cultural revolution of the 60s with hippies and Roe v. Wade, women's lib, man on the moon. Her life was lived in one of the greatest and most perilous centuries in our modern history, and she was marked by it all, resulting in frequent casual conversations about hydrogen bombs and oppressive dictators, which had underscored almost everything from Lucy's early adulthood onward. I can remember her worldview shaping mine as she told me stories about Russia, a vast kingdom that had been overthrown by tyrants and which was run by satanic atheists who had burned great onion-domed cathedrals and murdered priests. As her Alzheimer's worsened during my early teen years, Lucy spoke to me about a few things regularly: the Civil War, which her parents and grandparents had survived, her farm, and the Iron Curtain. She showed me a newspaper article at the kitchen table one day and taught me my first Russian word, pravda, the name of the paper. It's profound looking back and seeing how the simple fact that I was influenced by my great-grandmother meant that I would absorb ideas which were not typical for someone in my generation, and which I wouldn't have gotten from my peers. Fear of nuclear war, which made me literally obsessively watch the evening news during the Iran-Contra scandal as a first grader, and made me write a letter to Gorbachev in middle school asking him to please stand down or cease his rapid nuclear arms race. The influence of my great-grandmother made me ask to leave cheer practice early on the afternoon that the Iron Curtain fell, so I could rush home to see the TV coverage, cheering for the freedom I hoped democracy would bring the people of the USSR. That I understood all what was happening in the world as a 16-year-old girl is partly because my great-grandmother took the time to let her grandchildren shadow her. Lucy's influence gave me form. It was because of Lucy that I went to college for a few short years before getting caught in the Mormon tradwife trap, majoring in Russian, hoping to transition into an international law major at BYU 2 years later. I wanted to hop into the very unique field of trade coming out of the formerly communist Russian territories. And though she has been dead almost 30 years now, I can still hear Lucy's voice, can still see bits of her face when I look in the mirror at my own. This morning I baked a loaf of sourdough in her bread pan, a treasure I inherited when my grandmother died. Her milk glass centerpiece still sits on my kitchen island. Tragically, when Lucy's generation died, things began to shift. Families disconnected ever so slightly. Her children, the greatest generation, would still be solid grandparents, but they seem to have forgotten to pass the grandparenting baton on to the next wave of older adults. 2 weeks ago, I asked my 14-year-old son when the last time was that he heard from his dad's dad, Grandpa Steve. Brody looked genuinely shocked by my question. He asked, "Are you messing with me?" I told him no. I was honestly curious, to which he replied that he thought Grandpa Steve had died like 6 years ago. He was even more shocked to find out that Grandpa is still alive, but has inexplicably ghosted his grandkids. Brody is still grappling with the newly discovered situation 2 weeks later. We are seeing, regrettably, a wave of deadbeat grandparents who are too busy playing pickleball, cycling, and cruising Alaska to bother with sitting down to dinner with the children of their tribes, who have never and would never let a small child sit at the foot of their bed and watch their nighttime grooming routines, who assume that Google and TikTok are capable of educating the youngsters about history, and whose health and independence have given them the opportunity to explore the world far into their later years, and it's impacting all of us. South Korea currently has some of the lowest birth rates in the world, and one of the major reasons cited by young adults is the lack of grandparent involvement. Young Koreans simply choose not to have children if the nuclear family model is their only option. Americans are pushing back too, with millennials in particular venting across social media about the stresses of raising children without their parents' involvement. And perhaps the saddest effects are those things which are hard to measure and report on. The absence of the wisdom, experience, worldview, love, and correction of familial elders in the lives of our youth who don't even know what they're missing out on. I'm one of the last in my family to have a tribal childhood, and my children enjoyed a few years of it too. My granddad had a scheduled day every week to spend with my oldest two, hiking or hitting golf balls in his backyard in Scottsdale, or eating hot oatmeal cookies that grandma shaped a little extra large because she was a grandma and didn't have to care about a bedtime sugar rush. I treasure the last photo I have of my grandfather on the top of Piastua Peak with my two rowdy toddlers, and honestly wish there was a way to create this tribe for my younger children, but it has eluded too many of my generation, and I have no hope. And this is what I want you to listen to. We are, in fact, the hope, it turns out. They say that grandparenting is making a resurgence as the boomers begin to die, precisely because my generation has been so let down by the deadbeats and are committed to restructuring our tribes for the next generation. Perhaps we will be the first in decades to schedule cookie baking and golf ball hitting with our grandkids in our backyards. I hope so. I wouldn't be the woman I am without my elders. And I want to show you the photo of my granddad with my two children on top of Piastua Peak up in Paradise Valley. One of the last times he ever hiked with my kids before he passed away. We need to build out tribes for ourselves and our kids. Zoom back from that nuclear family and just focusing on husband and wife relationships and kids, and reach out to those elders and then to the ones younger than us. I don't actually have a family at all anymore outside of my nuclear family. I've been cut off and disowned by my Mormon family members for what I do. So I've had to seek out older friends and develop relationships with my new in-laws and people around me. I am always adopting grandmas, and I have to say that the older female mentors in my life are one of the things behind the scenes that have helped me survive everything that I've been through. And I receive constant little nuggets of wisdom from like an 86-year-old friend that I have, and she's only another one who's 62. And just finding and nurturing those elder tribal relationships has been so amazing for me. I value my gray-haired female friends so much for the things they teach me. I also do all that I can as a 50-year-old woman to be close to my grandson and make sure that I am really bringing everything that I can to the younger generation. And I act in like an adopted grandmother capacity to a single mom neighbor who lives just upstairs from me. They live on my ceiling here. Inviting them down to cook and do crafts and just play and get out of the house whenever she needs me to. I don't know where those of you listening are at in your path here in life, but here's what I hope you'll feel inspired to do after my little message. If you're young, call your grandma. Ask your teacher who's going to retire next year questions about his life. Get to know the elderly and recognize the value and nurture that relationship, because when you are older, you will be so grateful for all of the things that they taught you through osmosis. Learn their tricks before they're gone. And if you have any gray hair, spend more times with the generations behind you, knowing that they need you so very much. And how do we wrap up our sermons in the Church of Korihor? That's it. Amen. Joe, I'd love to hear from you.
I have to unmute my microphone if I'm going to be heard.
That often helps. That's a secret.
Well, if you pass the mic, you pass the mic. That's the way that works, right? I mean, you said, how do we end a sermon in the Church of Korihor? I said, you got to tell me. but that works for me. I like the word amen. You know, there's a lot of question around how that word came about, and but at the end of the day, I said it doesn't matter where it came from so much as what it means in our society. It means we agree, and we're all in the same position. We're all together, and so I say amen.
I mean, we could
I
do
you know
boom and mic drop. Boom. So many
they could
options.
do that.
But I don't know.
That
That's
that could be
engineers
clever
did.
too. The Korihor mic drop. We'll just carry a microphone with us wherever we go and just doesn't do anything except get dropped. Like bam. Like those damn Korihors. They always do that. I was talking with Maven down in the comments about
Hi,
who was
Maven.
mentioning. Yeah, it's great to have Maven with us. You guys know her. I'm sure most of you who are alive, you know who Maven is.
Maven works
But
at Moments for This. She's so fabulous.
yeah, absolutely. And she has
And
her own
her
channel.
podcast is so great.
Yep, her channel and podcast is When We Choose. Is that right? And but she advocates for women's rights, and it's it's amazing. We need more voices like Maven's out there. It's interesting because I was saying in the comments there that whatever happened to the role of a matron. Like I every time I've mentioned this, like on dates with women, or when I'm or with my wife, or however, whenever I bring this up, I'm like, matron became such a negative thing, and a bad word in our society, and I hate that. And it's like, because who would want to be called matronly, right? That's like an insult. And it's like, there's nothing insulting about that. There has to be a role for women, especially older women. The fact that I was talking to one of the people who's been helping me with my podcast. We were talking about Joe Hill, who was a labor activist and who was executed here in the state of Utah, and set up for basically for murder, basically set up for a for capital punishment. And what happened was that as I looked into the labor movement, I came to find that the labor movement was really started by women, and nobody really pays enough attention to that. But the first strikes that were really organized and significant were the people where women from I believe it was in New York, who did the bread and roses strike. And they ran it in the paper. There was a woman who these were many of them, they were cooks, they were laundresses, they were people who did childcare for wealthy people. They were people who were not getting paid nearly enough to live, and yet required to live in a place where the cost of living was rising. Sound familiar to anybody out there? Right? And these women, they took to the streets and said, guess what? If we all stick together, suddenly all that goes away, and you all can't live without it. And so one of these women, she was carrying this giant sign in front of her that said, "We want bread. Yes, give us bread, but give us roses too." And it was like, this is a movement that needed women. And so as the labor movement started to subside with the rise of far right wing influence in America, without saying anything too political, as that started to subside, you also begin to see the role of women in society beginning to regress again back into, okay, you first you will get up and speak so that your husband can speak, and things like this. You see that reverting back to that old regressive ideology. And I'm like, no wonder we came to a society where women who are over 50 don't get roles in really women who get past 30 start to have diminished roles in Hollywood. All of a sudden we don't feature them as much on the covers of magazines or on television. And it's like, it's no surprise to me that those two things coincided. So,
Well, and it's
all
an
right.
insult when somebody calls you grandpa, like, get out of the way, grandpa. We very much live. I have a friend who has her PhD in ageism, and it's fascinating to dialogue with her about cultural shifts that have minimized our respect for and connection to our elders in the tribe. And a lot of the discontent that we have in our families as nuclear families raising kids can be directly traced to the fact that we don't have those elders that are anymore participating in child rearing. And we're missing out on so many things that can't be measured. Like I say, like all of the wisdom and the patterning and the examples. And if you're curious about this at all, Gabor Mate, who has written so many books. He was a doctor for many years. He worked in family practice, so he worked with a lot of children. And he writes prolifically about sociological and psychological research around tribalism and human relationships, the nuclear family, things like attachment styles, etc. And he talks about how that we are supposed to have those elders that we learn from because we are subconscious dominant, we're imprinting and learning beautiful patterns. But when the elders are missing, what happens is all of the kids are just like monkey see, monkey do, like go over to your friend's house and play. And we're no longer around these multi-generational tribes like we have been for 160,000 years of Homo sapiens sapien history that we know of. And it's leading to so many things that are all negative, none of them positive. And it's very simple for us to correct this. I work daily to expand my tribe. I make sure that rather than just me and Kevin spending every bloody waking minute together, that we uncouple intentionally, frequently. He has activities outside of me with a whole men's group and all of these different people, and I have activities outside of him. And I'm always focused on like casting my net to see what multi-generational friend I can bring into my tribe instead of just another, 40-something, 50-something-year-old mom like myself. I am always casting that net to build out my tribe. So Gabor Mate, all of his books are absolutely fascinating. And I'll send you a link for a podcast where he talks about the perils of losing those tribal elders, and we can post that in the script.
I love it. Gabor Mate. I've never actually read his stuff, and so I'm frankly, I didn't know hardly anything about him until you spoke. That's like Alain de Botton for me. I was tomorrow we're going to be premiering my interview with the one and only Britt Hartley, who is a friend of yours, Jenny. So that made her that credit. Britt's the most amazing. People who don't know her out there, you gotta learn about Britt Hartley. She's got nothing to do with the Church of Korihor at this point. We just love this person, and she was so wise. People who don't know, she's an atheist. I think she officially uses atheist, but in any event, an agnostic, godless person who is a spiritual director who just meets with clients and guides their spiritual journey. And then she also has on her website she has her podcast, No Nonsense Spirituality. And on her website, nononsensespirituality.com, I believe, she has courses.
I don't think you can transition out of faith without her book either, Joe. If I can just interject there, her book, which is No Nonsense Spirituality. If I had her book 6 years ago when I was leaving the Mormon church, and then 4 years ago when I broke up with Jesus, my life would have been different. I would have had more awareness and understanding, and I would have landed a little softer. So like the minute you have a faith crisis or know that a friend is having a faith crisis, I don't promote a lot of books. There's only a very small few that I ever promote. I do not think that you can go through a faith crisis without her book, No Nonsense Spirituality.
I love it. And she and I were talking about, and she, I would, because I'll ask Britt Hartley, I'll ask her, have you ever read this book? And she'll be like, several times. And and she's like one of the most well-read people I know, maybe the most well-read person that I know. And we bonded for about an hour, frankly, over Alain de Botton and pessimism. And I'm like, man, here's the thing. We don't have scripture in the Church of Korihor yet. But if we did, it would be these wise people have nothing to do with our church. And it's like there's so many things. Oh, Bobby was I don't know if that's really your name, Bobby, but I'm going to call you that. You've been commenting, and your comments are really valuable. Says I recommend Marcus Aurelius. I love Marcus Aurelius, who was really a Stoic. I like Stoicism fine. I'm more of a pessimist person myself. But I love the Stoics. It's like I've talked about, like Winston Churchill, who was a Stoic, said that success is going from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm. And that's scripture, if anything, is the Church of Korihor. As I've said many times, we intend fully to fail. So, and the way that we fail, and matter of fact, tomorrow's video is titled, This Atheist Church Will Fail with Britt Hartley. And it's got a great little image. They got this image of me and Britt in a car driving off of a cliff. And I did clear by her. She thinks it's funny. So anyways, I just wanted to mention to you guys real quickly that we have several great episodes coming up in the next week. We do have, I'll be going on Cultural Hall on Thursday. I also will have a new episode on Wednesday with Sam Nieves, who is a gay ex-Mormon who has probably been one of the most interesting people I have learned about with this. You know, he helps to run the gay conversion. I'm gonna mess up the name, but I do that. He runs the Conversion Survivor Network, Gay Conversion Survivor Network. But basically, while he was a Mormon, he was one of these gay Mormons who would go to camps where people taught him how to be a man, and that being a man meant that you were in love with women. And ironically enough, these things, they become very homoerotic celebrations of, frankly, gay people trying to not be gay. And to hear his story would just break your heart. And so I told him about my interview recently with Rob Lauer, who's a gay reform Mormon, who I had asked him, what does coming out look like? If there were a coming out ceremony, what would it look like? And he basically told me, I don't think kids have to come out these days. Young people, they don't have to come out. And that's a wonderful thing. And I personally, on the one side, I go, shit, I hope that's true. I hope that we've become a society where you don't have to come out as gay because everybody accepts you and loves you as you are. Running that feedback by some queer people, I got a few people who said, get more opinions. And Sam was one of them. I reached out to him, and he said, you'll want my opinion on this. And because he said, here's the thing, that we're not a monolith, gay people. He said, we are not homogenous entirely. We are different people. And he said, and privilege affects everybody in the community, in every community. And so I'm going to get a chance to talk to him and say, is it inclusive or not inclusive to have a special ritual just for coming out, just for gay people? And last night I had this great episode. Some of you wanted to check it out. Jules Treasures, who is a YouTube creator who is a trans woman. I asked her, is it inclusive to have a name ceremony, or an aurora, as we were calling it? Now we're thinking about calling it something like a chrysalis, because apparently inside the trans community, the symbolism of butterflies is very important. This transformation that your true self emerges as the butterfly from the chrysalis. So who knows? The great thing about having a church that's not based on any revelations is that you can change it. I told that to Sam, because Sam pointed out to me, he's like, I checked out the website, which is korihor.org, Korihor. Think, if you hear the word Korihor, think of the stupidest way you could spell it. That's the way Joseph Smith spelled it. Yes, he did. Mormons, just sit down. And so if you go to korihor.org, he's like, I love these 12 values of Korihorism. And in fact, he told me, I hope I'm not revealing too much. I mean, just hours after speaking with me on the phone, arranging for our conversation next week, Sam Nieves told me, I think I might want to join this church. I was like, listen, that wasn't the objective, but you're welcome. You're welcome here at the Church of Korihor. To wit, we lost Jenny there for a minute. She's back, but we have her waiting in the wings. But I just wanted to get this right away for people who need to get running. I just want a chance for you all to witness the first conversion to Korihorism, which will be mine. I'll probably screw it up, but that's what we do. That's what we do here at the Church of Korihor. We fail consistently, but we fail faster and faster until we figure out how to not fail at all, or at least fail less than we succeed. So here's how it will go. When a person is like myself, is going to become a convert to the Church of Korihor. They take the oath of reason instead of a baptism. See, even screwed that up. We do that. We celebrate failure here at the Church of Korihor. And you'll take the oath of reason by placing the left hand over the heart and raising the right hand high up into the air. I'm going to step back while I do it so you guys can actually see how it's done, and then recite the oath of reason. When you do it in the presence of a herald of the Church of Korihor, and the herald then turns to the congregation and says, we welcome them now into the congregation, into which we call fellowship. You are officially a member of the Church of Korihor. And we do charge tithing. And you, as it says in the Book of Mormon, says that, which, if anything, is going to be a scripture, maybe we will actually canonize the 1830 version of the Book of Mormon. That'll make the Mormons just ecstatic. But it says that Korihor did cause many of the women, yea, and even also the men, which has always been an interesting thing to me that it said that, also the men, to commit many whoredoms. I love to think of Korihor as like the most progressive sex worker that there ever was. I like that. You know, it's like, well, maybe he was better at it than other people, you know. But one of the things that I joke with people who learn about it's like about that the Church of Korihor charges $2 a month in tithing. I say, you know what? Don't join the Church of Korihor if you can't afford to pay tithing, because you know that $2 a month, that's Korihor's money, and Korihor wants his money. So it's better than 10%, right? But the fact of the matter is, you know, I've bankrolled this entire operation, and I'm not complaining because it's been very inexpensive. And so far, it's surprising how easy it is sometimes, how easy it has been to start a church. It kind of makes you actually disturbed. So I will now recite the oath of reason for all of those of you who want to see it. And then we will have that to show other people when they decide to convert to Korihorism, which you will be able to do online at the website. And you'll also be able to do, you'll be able to arrange to do it publicly here on one of our Sunday sermons. So all of that will be available on the church's website as soon as we get things set up a little more formally. We're failing a little bit here to get the church set up officially. Government-wise, there turned out to be a few bureaucratic hurdles I wasn't expecting, but I'm confident that we're going to fail faster until we actually make it happen. So anyway, this is the first oath of reason of the Church of Korihor. See if I can do this. I made this nice and big so I can do it. All right. Hopefully you guys can hear me from back there. Let me move up my camera. Don't judge my messy office. I've been starting a church. I've been a busy person. I've been a very busy artist. Okay. Well, that's not working at all. Here, just gonna tilt it up. Do it old school. Okay. All right. So take this off. Well, I'm not officiating as the as a spiritual leader. Instead, I'm a convert. It goes like this. Okay, let me just pull up the words so I don't screw it up. All right, here it goes. First conversion to the Church of Korihor. Place the left hand on the heart. Raise the right hand up high and say, from this breath to my last breath, I, Joseph Rollins, do hereby swear that I embrace the teachings of my exemplar, Korihor. Abandoning all false gods, I seek only the light of reason, and I renounce membership in every other church. Please receive me into fellowship with the Church of Korihor. Amen. And then, being the only herald present, also the only herald in the church, for now, we'll then state to the fellowship, we warmly receive Joseph Rollins into the Church of Korihor. Welcome. And so, there you have it. That easy. Now people will be able to take the oath of reason online, and they'll be able to do it by will be able to do things digitally. You'll be able to record yourself taking the oath of reason, or take a picture on your phone, a selfie of you taking the oath of reason, and submit it online. Boy, my office is messy. Sorry about that, friends. Let me get Longitude up here. And you'll be able to join the church digitally, and then you'll receive a certificate from the Church of Korihor that you can send to other churches that you belong to. Some of you, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. Okay, you will receive a certificate that says that you have joined the Church of Korihor and renounced membership in any other church. So any other church that counts you as a member, that you're not happy about that, and that forbids you to join any other church lest you be excommunicated for joining another church for apostasy, well, then you've just plainly stated to them, excommunicate me. Don't wait for me to resign. I ain't coming to you. Or I've tried resigning from this organization that is making it impossible for me to resign from this organization. Just let you know, I've committed apostasy. I've done it, you guys. I've been kicked out of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for apostasy. Let me tell you what I did to earn that. I went out and told my bishop. Some of you have already heard this story. I told my wife's bishop, because I didn't go to church for 10 years. I was a quiet ex-Mormon for 10 years, still on the rolls, member on the rolls of the church. And he asked me why my wife is into such things as she's into. I'm trying to keep this more or less PG-13. I'm like, look, I'm a pervert, and I like it when my wife does these things for me. And I basically took it upon myself. My wife's sins, like Jesus. I'm just kidding. Sorry. And he said, why would a person who believes in God, who fears God's punishment and wrath, do such a thing? I was like, oh, I don't believe in God. I haven't believed in God for a decade. And he's like, well, you have to resign. And I said, first of all, we invented resignation. You guys don't get to tell us when we resign. I said, and secondly, my mother is happy thinking that I'll come back to the church. He's like, well, your mom could be alive for decades. And I'm like, that's true, because he knew my mom. She was in their congregation. And I said, well, that's true, but I'm content to wait. It's fine. I'm like, I don't believe in this church, and I don't care if they have me on the rolls. I said, if I was going to leave, I'd have to be kicked out. And he said, if you don't resign your membership in this church today, I will submit you for a court of love, which is the Mormon church court. And I was like, oh, yeah, let's do that. And he's like, what? I'm like, no, I like that, because then I get closure with the church, and the church has an opportunity to get closure with me. I like that. But let me tell you, while I have been happy and proud, I went gunning for that fight where I was excommunicated. And let me tell you, oh, that's okay. That's okay. Jennie had to drop out, you guys, but that's fine. I mean, Jennie, you did such a great job. I loved this whole experience. So thank you for being here. And we're going to have lots of great content coming out. You guys, make sure that you leave in the comments out there, especially in the future. Did you love the sermon with Jennie? I mean, don't we all want to hear more from Jennie? I mean, she just did such an incredible job. And I'm just so privileged to have even met this person. We met on Beth Magnetic's podcast at Mormon True Crime. And I had seen her channel before. She hadn't seen mine. I'm sure most people hadn't at that point. The channel, the Hellfire Agency, was still very small. But after that, and I contacted her and I said, I'm looking for directors for the Church of Korihor. I reached out to a small handful of people that I happened to know were atheists. And I had heard her mention on Beth Magnetic's podcast that she, basically in her Life Take Two experience, that Jennie had become an atheist, that she discovered basically in a near-death experience that she didn't believe that there was God, that for the first time she really could not believe that there was a God. And I went, oh, see, that's the kind of people we need. So I reached out to her with an invitation. I'm looking for directors for the Church of Korihor. I think you would be great for it. You let me know what you think. And she was one of the first people who got back to me and said, "Oh my God, yes." Well, she didn't say, "Oh my God." We all should stop saying it, and me especially. But she's like, "Yes, I love it." And so ever since that day, I'm like, my gosh, this woman is so much more of a leader in this church right from the get-go than I am, and I love everything about it, the energy that she brings to it. I could not right, oh my god, as she says down in the comments, I can't bring what she brings to this church, and we need it. We need these voices, in our congregation. So I was mentioning, okay, so I was trying to wrap up with something here. Okay, we talked about conversion. People will be able to convert on. Oh yeah, no, my real quickly, my excommunication. I'm so glad we have permission from the agnostics. At the end of the day, I tell people all the time, there are no atheists. There are only agnostics. They're people who are different levels of Dawkins, scale agnostics. I know a lot of people don't like Richard Dawkins. He's been saying some very transphobic things. I don't like that. But I just don't think that we cancel people because they don't agree with all of our values. His values don't entirely agree with mine, but I respect and honor Richard Dawkins for the contribution he made to my atheism, and it was very important for me. And so he can be wrong about trans people. Frankly, so can Sam Harris. And I'm sorry, Sam, but your comments since the election, I love you. I love Sam Harris so much, and I won't stop loving him. But I was surprised. I was surprised, Sam. So if I'm the only atheist out here talking about that trans women are women, and if I'm the only one out here saying that women deserve to be in rooms where decisions are made, then I'll be the only one. But I'm not. But I'm not out there, right? I'm not the only one. And we're gathering people into the fold. To wit, I just just to finish that story, those who are curious, I wound up with my bishop, my stake president, coming to my office out there in American Fork, out here in American Fork. He came to my office while I was working and said, "I wanted to have a conversation with you." He said, "We don't have anything to excommunicate you for." And I said, "What?" And he's like, "We don't have any reason to kick you out of the church. Technically, you have to commit a sin." And I said, "Oh, well, I break the word of wisdom. You can kick me out for that." And he said, "We don't do that anymore." I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, no, we used to do it all the time. You drink coffee, you drink alcohol, we kick you out, but we don't do that anymore." I was like, "Well, fairly progressive. Good on you." I said, and he said, he said, "What about adultery?" And I said, "Well, I mean, I don't actually cheat on my wife, so that doesn't fit." And he's like, "Oh," and I'm like, and technically we fornicated before we were married, but the church married us. That was part of the repentance process. They didn't really seem to care to ask me, "Well, do you believe in God?" And or do you think that the church is legitimate? It's like nothing. They just wanted to get us married as soon as possible. Mormon shotgun wedding. And I said, "Well, what about apostasy?" And he said to me, I was surprised at this actually. He said, "You have to join another church to be apostate." I knew that was one of the conditions to becoming an apostate, to being kicked out for apostasy. But I said, that's not the main thing, though. I'm like, apostasy means that you teach people things that cause them to leave the church, or that are false doctrine, or that are not in keeping with the teachings of the church. And he's like, "Well, yeah, but you don't do that." I said, "I've caused several people to resign from the church by telling them that Joseph Smith was, and I won't use the word here, but it rhymes with a schmedophile, and that he was a liar, a con man, and a thief." And he's like, "Oh, really?" And people leave the church over this? I said, "I've seen it happen many times." I didn't tell him that I was in the final editing stages of the Korihor argument, where more people would decide that they were ready to leave the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he's like, "Oh, then apostasy." But that's what it took for me to then wind up at a court of love that coming Sunday, to be excommunicated from the church. I have it around here somewhere. I have my letter right there behind me. I framed that letter. I was proud of it. I loved it. I recorded it. Unfortunately, that recording is lost now. But I cried while telling these men all the reasons why I believed that Mormonism could not be true and that God could not be real. And I cried. I kept it together until I said, look, I want to believe that I can be with my children forever and my wife forever. But it's just not real. And I won't live a life based on lies. I would want to be with Molly and my children forever if I could. And if there's any reason to believe that that was possible, you wouldn't be sitting there judging me now. But the fact of the matter is, it's not real, and I'm going to live my life by what's real. And so that's how I got kicked out of the Mormon church. Now, Jennie had this in her experience, was talking about that she tried, isn't it 3 times, Jennie? I don't know if you're still out there in the comments, that she tried 3 times to resign from the church. I have met several people who have said that they tried to they tried to resign from the church using quitmormon.org, which is about the simplest process that they have available now, which still involves that you have to go online, you have to fill out a form letter, and then you have to get it notarized, and then they can send it in for you here in Salt Lake. It's a very generous attorney who runs the organization that runs quitmormon.org. I don't want to say anything bad about him, Mr. Nagel, I believe. Is it Charles Nagel? And I don't want to say anything bad about him because or their service, because that's how people are leaving the church these days, since the Mormon church made it basically impossible to resign from the church online through their website. And they've made it next to impossible for people to resign from their congregation by sending the letter in to their bishop or their stake president. Those people are starting to push back and say, no, stay in the church. You don't want to leave the church, and they start to harass them. They're starting to harass people to stay in the church. And this is true about churches all over the country and all over the world, frankly. And I'm like, but most of these churches, I know it's true about the Mormon church. From what I understand, it's true about the Jehovah's Witnesses. From what I understand, it's true about the Seventh-day Adventists. Somebody out there, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just going on what information I have. Basically the same rule. If you join another church, they kick you out of theirs because you can't be practicing some other church. And so when you take the oath of reason, it's very specific. We want people to join because you believe in the values, the 12 values of Korihorism as they currently are on the church when you join, which we will change them. But then we also want people to join who want to leave God churches behind and leave God in the dust and start working towards a future where we are here for each other. And so in the future, very near future, we will have the ability for people to take the oath of reason at home by yourself and just record it and submit it to the church. And then we will send you back a receipt after a herald from the church has reviewed and watched your video or reviewed your statement and your statement of the oath of reason. And then we will send you, if we receive you into fellowship, we will send you a certificate, which we will then publish on the website so that anybody can go to it and you can link it to anybody. You can send an email to your bishop, to your stake president, to the church records, or whatever corresponding entity there is at your church where you currently reside and say, I've joined the Church of Korihor. Apostatize me, anathematize me, kick my ass out. I don't believe in your false God. I don't believe in your false religion. Kick me out. And so I hope to have more people being able to do this, to be able to leave these toxic churches behind without needing to go through all of the painful experience that it has been for me and for others. I was mentioning quitmormon.org. Just real quickly, and no, I'm rambling at this point, and we're gonna wrap up here. I've been surprised how many people have been telling me lately that they tried using quitmormon.org to leave the church, and the church rejected their resignation, and then so they had to try again and again, and it's becoming increasingly frustrating to leave these churches behind. I want to expedite that process. I want an opportunity for people to state clearly and boldly that they are committing apostasy. I'm committing blasphemy. I commit the sin worse than murder. You know, in the Mormon church, they have the sin next to murder, which is anything, you know, anything sexual, any sexual sin, and basically is adultery. In fact, when I had that visit with my bishop, with my stake president, excuse me, in my office, as we decided on apostasy, and then he walked out the door. And as he was in the door of my office, he said to me, you know, hear me out. Are you addicted to pornography? And I said, what? And he's like, are you addicted to pornography? And he was a little too excited about it. And I said, no. And I didn't tell him, nobody is. The science is in on this. That's not a thing. It doesn't exist. And he's like, oh, I surely thought you would be. I was like, I'm a pervert. It doesn't mean I'm an addict. I'm only a pervert by your standards. There are people, frankly, inside the church, frankly, I've come to discover since then that my perversions would be quite vanilla compared to. And he said, oh, okay. I said, you think you can kick people out because they're looking at porn? And he's like, yeah, it's adultery. And I was like, President Mitchell, you really think your Mormons aren't looking at porn? BS. You would have to excommunicate this entire congregation. Are you kidding me? No way. No way. No way. I don't buy it. I said, apostasy suits me fine. And he's like, oh, all right. I'm like, this is ridiculous, man. It's amazing what the hangups are in this organization. Anyways, I want to thank you guys all for coming out to church today. We are the Church of Korihor. Yes, we are. Don't let them tell you that we're not. We have submitted paperwork to the state of Utah. We are supposed to hear back on that anytime soon. I've submitted to have an EIN number created for the church, and we will in the next week. The plan this week is to get the letter fired off to the Internal Revenue Service to get officially registered as a 501c3 tax-exempt organization. Before we get that letter back, by the law, if you donate to the Church of Korihor, all of your donations are supposed to be tax-exempt or tax deductible. And so at that point, we will set up a bank account, and we will set up sub bank accounts. Now, the idea is going to be this, and I just want to clarify this so people know what to expect in the future. So the church will have a main bank account, a general fund from which the business of the church will be conducted. The only members of the clergy that will be paid out of the general fund of the church will be the heralds, which at this point is just me. But in the future, I plan to ordain more heralds. As a matter of fact, I'd like in the 2025, my goal is to ordain at least 3 heralds and probably at most 6. I also hope that we will be able to, out of the membership of the church, because you have to be a member to be a herald or to be a director. And I do hope to expand our directors to as many as 6 directors of the Church of Korihor. So those do have to be members. Apart from that, our lay clergy is a little bit different than anything else that any other organization that I know of, with the exception of Ministries of Marriage. Ministries of Marriage, there's these online websites where you can go and you can choose your title and everything, and you can become basically a wedding officiant in their church without having to be. Maven asks a very good question. Let me answer that here in a second. You don't have to be a member of our church to be a, and similarly in the Ministries of Marriage, you can become a wedding officiant oftentimes without paying any money. Problem is that sometimes state and municipal governments have been kicking back on those things, on those ordinations, saying, wait a minute, you can't just go to a website and fill out a form and become a minister, which, says who? Frankly, I think it's unconstitutional. But anyways, this has become a problem. We're in this society that is shifting its values around. And these are some of the things they're doing. They're even cracking down in a way on churches. Well, one of the things is that they say, well, these people, besides the fact that they're not members of these churches, maybe some churches don't require you to be a member to be a pastor or whatever, to be clergy, but you have to at least provide them some professional training, or they have to be people who are paid to become to preach and so forth, or whatever, which raises questions like, why is it then that Mormon bishops can marry people? They don't technically, theoretically, don't get paid to do that. So here's what we're doing. We're elevating the status of this lay clergy, luminaries, which we expect, I hope, in 2025 to ordain hundreds, frankly, at least 100 luminaries. I want to have at least 2 luminaries in every state in the union who are working in our missions. There will be a separate bank account for the Missions of Reason. And every penny that goes into that, 100 pennies out of every dollar that clears through into the Missions of Reason will go to the missions. The Missions of Reason right now that we're going to be launching, there will be a general luminaries group who are people who want to be wedding officiants and people who want to perform sacraments like the uncoupling ceremony that Jennie is helping us to craft. Also to perform exorations, which I personally am crafting, which is a funeral pyre for God. And we're going to see in the future a chrysalis ceremony, likely is what we'll call it, for celebrating trans people, unless, of course, I get enough trans people to tell me they don't like that idea. So far, I've got one interview with one trans person who loved the idea. And so I think we're definitely going to do it. We may or may not have a coming out ceremony. We'll see what happens out of my conversation with Sam Nieves this Wednesday. And we're going to have more conversations like this. All of these ceremonies, it's going to be a beautiful experience. You'll get a stole like this. You're going to get some materials if you become ordained as a luminary, and you'll receive training. There will be a seminary for luminaries, a luminary seminary, where you will actually receive ongoing training and where you'll be welcome to attend our in-person symposia, which will be training for the clergy and opportunities for people to hear from prolific speakers. I really hope to have Jennie speak at probably all these symposia, as long as she wants to. Our first one we're talking about doing in March in Sedona, Arizona. We'll see if that works out. I was going to do it up here in Park City, but as it gets colder and colder here in Utah, I say, got a lot of people interested in the Church of Korihor down in like Tucson and Mesa and Phoenix. Maybe we go to Arizona in March. Yeah. Let's go to Arizona. I grew up in Mesa like Jennie did. So, and we didn't know each other until now. Go figure. Also, our friend Beth Magnetic, who's not associated with the church at all so far, she's down in Arizona. I hope she doesn't mind my saying that. I think she's been public about that. But in any event, I really do want to thank you guys for coming out to church today. We are the Church of Korihor. We aren't starting on time lately for these sermons. I'm usually a couple minutes late. I apologize for that. In the future, I'm going to get better at that, but we do failure. So I want to thank. I was going to mention something about Maven's comment back here. Boom. Oh yeah, I've already lost it because I went on and on about stuff. Let's see here. Well, we'll have to catch it next time. Listen, guys, I do appreciate you for being here and for being supportive. Please make sure that you go check out korihor.org. Make sure that you check out Life Take 2, Jennie's channel, and that you go and subscribe and support the amazing work that she's doing there. Thank you all very much for being here. And until next time, fight like hellfire.